Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the August 8th episode of Security Data Operations. This is our bi-monthly stream to talk about all things security operations, data operations, and really the convergence of the two in the modern day cybersecurity. I'm super excited, as always, for these streams. Very, very fast, very quick coming. We're going to come at you super fast. I'm super excited for my guest today, as always. We are streaming across multiple platforms. I absolutely love it, whether you're on X, Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. Unfortunately, we did not get the TikToks up and running. Sad. I actually wanted to see if I could get Jax to dance a little bit on screen for a little TikTok, but I guess we won't get that one. So we're just streaming across all the other platforms. So make sure wherever you are, you're tuned in, excited to get to today's content. Let's hit a couple rules super fast before I introduce my guest for the day. Number one, first and foremost, no toxicity, absolutely whatsoever. What does that mean? No racist, sexist, misogynistic, elitist, or otherwise toxic behavior is allowed in chat at any point in time. No tolerance. We have a zero tolerance policy for that. Absolutely. We do have mods in chat. Make sure you give a huge shout out, whatever platform you're on, to our moderators. Moderators do work tirelessly to try to make sure that chat is a free and inclusive environment for everybody to participate in. Mods make no qualms out of utilizing that ban button out of any of the platforms if you are in violation of any of the rules. Mods, however, are not here to stifle chat in any way whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we absolutely want to hear from you. One of the values that comes from these streams and any of the cyber and security streams being live is that you get to speak with professionals like myself and Jax and other guests that we have, on a regular basis, and really get to experience what it's like to talk to folks like us. Which leads us really to kind of our second rule, which is really more of a reminder than it is anything else. We love questions. Absolutely, hands down, we absolutely love questions. Jax is a fellow content creator. I'll get to that in a little bit. We absolutely love to interact with the community and answer your questions. And so one of the benefits from these streams being live, as I mentioned, is the ability to ask and answer questions in real time. So we encourage questions throughout the stream. Drop them at any point in time across whatever platform you happen to be under. We'll grab those questions and we'll push them up on screen as we see fit. It's always better. We always do this because instead of waiting for a dedicated Q&A time at the end, you get your question in early. We get to push it up early and we get to ask the questions throughout the course of the stream. This way we keep it interactive, and that's how we really like to do it. And so without absolutely further ado, that's probably the quickest intro that I ever do in my entire life, Jax. Without further ado, chat, put your hands together across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, X for my good friend. So good to see you, Jax. Welcome to the Sec Data Ops
stream. Oh man, I'm on the stage.
You are.
Did you see me back here trying to do selfies? I was like,
oh God.
Maybe I can do a selfie while he's talking. I think it turned out okay. I'll post that later.
Oh, jeez. You gonna get the selfie. Look at we go selfie time.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun. Oh my God.
How are you doing?
Oh, it has been fun. Yeah, let's just say it's been fun with the new job and everything, moving, life. I've been great.
Good.
At the end of the day now. Yeah,
Good.
It's been great.
I can't imagine that there is anybody in chat that doesn't know you. But just in case you've never met Jax, just in case you've never seen Jax before, she's been on the stream before, I've been on her content before, she puts a ton of content out there. You're insanely popular with the cybersecurity community. So let me recap really fast, because I love to brag about my guests and I love to brag about you particularly, right? First and foremost, thank you so very much for your military service. You were in the military, and on top of that, you were Special Forces, Army Special Forces, and you were forward deployed. So thank you very much for your military service for that. You've also held some really awesome roles with Cap One doing threat intel. You were a threat intel warrant officer. You were a consultant for Guidehouse, which was formerly Grant Thornton. And currently you are VP of cybersecurity for Pearson, which is, as everybody knows, is a global tech company or global ed tech company that's out there. And that's just your day job, is leading a major function for a large organization like Pearson. You also have an immense amount of community endeavors where you're a member of the Counterterrorism Project with the Atlantic Council. You're a cyber influencer for the U.S. Army Reserve. You're a fellow content creator with your own Outpost Gray YouTube channels and your ITSP magazine podcast with our good friend Erica McDuffie. So you're not busy at all, are you? You've got like tons of time to do this podcast with me.
All day. Yeah. I actually texted you and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to need a break break before I hop in there. I had to like go outside, and I went outside to go walk, Neal, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this break. It's so nice. It's a little rainy. As soon as I walked outside and walked like 10 feet down, it just started raining on me. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to walk outside. So I came back inside, and I was like, I just need to step away from the desk for a while. But yeah, and we'll dive into all of that, like the busy side as you climb the ladder, being in cybersecurity, because it's like training, physical fitness. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at it, and you learn how to level up.
Well, on that same note, how do you manage your time with all this stuff that you've got going on?
Oh gosh, time blocking, color coding, delegation is key. Being in a senior executive role, one of the biggest challenges I faced going from going into an executive role, it was mid-executive role. It's very different being there than being in a senior executive role where you're driving strategy, metrics. You're not doing the day-to-day work. You're driving the day-to-day work. You don't get like footnotes when you go into this role. So for me, it was relearning how to time block appropriately to my skill, like my position, my skills, and then learning how to properly manage the talented team that I had so I could delegate, because there would be times I delegated a task that wasn't made for this person. He's more technical, or she should have been given this task, for example. So that's been my big thing, is just learning how to up-level my skills to that VP level appropriately. And then really it's ease and grace. I tell people this all the time, but it's like, some days I just don't feel it. And some days I'm going to get behind, but the work's always going to be there, and I'll figure it out. And I did about 2 weeks ago start putting time blocks into my calendar. Today got kind of usurped due to a fire that we had to put out. But I time block, like blocks for me, and I don't let people take them. And 2 weeks ago, I actually communicated to my senior leadership and to my team, hey, I'm time blocking most of my Fridays now. I'll take about 2 hours worth of calls, but after that, I've time blocked most of my day for deep work.
Can you real quick, as you talk about that, can you give people like an idea of what time blocking is, and then how do you operationalize this idea of time blocking? Like I think we make a little bit of assumption that everybody knows what it is, but how do you do it, and then how do you operationalize it?
Yeah, this is such a great question, because I've heard people try to do time blocking and they're like, but it's too rigid. And what if I get to that task and then I want to do something different? So I'm going to explain with you what I do. But it takes a lot of discipline at the end of the day. So my calendar, first thing in the morning, every single day, 7 to 8 a.m., because I work UK time, is blocked because I start work. And that is when I check emails and I prepare for the day. So it is time blocked, check emails, prepare for the day. I typically will never take a meeting before 8 a.m. unless it is like time sensitive and I just have to. My meetings start at 8 o'clock, and it's pretty much like 8 till 2 o'clock until my UK guys go home. It is back to back to back to back. So what I try to do in that time is the start of the week, I already have my predetermined meetings, and then I go in there and then I put extra 30-minute blocks between maybe 2-hour windows, or where there's a natural break, so I don't have to move meetings that are already there. And then I time block, and the block will say whatever that task is going to be. It could be going for a walk. It could be working on an HVA deck, whatever I need to do. And so when I get to that time block, I do not care how I feel. I get the task done. Now, again, ease and grace. So if you need to move it, you move it. But the whole purpose of time blocking is to get stuff done, stay fluid. And a lot of people try to do this, and then they get to the task, they're like, I don't really want to do that. So now you're defeating the purpose of time blocking. So that's how I do it. I also have time blocked an hour in the afternoon every single day, right around 2 or 3. And it's my PT time. I go work out. I go for a walk. Today did not happen. But usually that is my sacred moment. And then when I come back from 3 o'clock, typically I don't have meetings after that. And I do deep work till about 6 or 7 to catch up with the day. And that's usually my day every day. And I take control of my calendar. I don't let the calendar control me. Yeah.
There you go. I like that. I love that. That's great advice. Y'all need to take that. Make sure you clip that. Make sure you record that. That is probably some of the best advice that you all are going to get in a while. Let's dive into a few topics really quick, Jax, because there's definitely some things on your radar that I want to try to pull out for the community. And let's really start with your move from Guidehouse to Pearson. And I often talk to my community that there is an immense value in spending time in your career in consulting. I spent time at PwC. My wife did a long stint at PwC. Like, I'm huge on that value of consulting, and you get to see a lot of different challenges and solve a lot of diverse problems in consulting. But there's always that dynamic shift when you leave consulting and go to work for a big org like Pearson. And so can you dive deep into what that challenge was like for you to go from consulting to leading a global function like you are at Pearson?
Yeah, I think taking a step back for the audience too, because you know me, so you know kind of where my journey's been. And a lot of people probably don't know that most of my time has been spent supporting or working in the government space. Mine is Capital One, because even when I worked at Fire, Mandiant, I was a consultant for the federal space. So I had very little experience in the corporate sector, maybe a few years. So it's good to mention that, because it's a very different animal in the corporate world. But I can tell you, I was ready to move to the corporate sector from the federal sector. However, what you aren't prepared for when you're a consultant is, as a consultant, you go in and you solve problems. You go in, you assess their environment, you provide them solutions. They do the implementation. They do the execution. You're like this is a oversimplified thing, but you're a program manager. You're a technical program manager. You go in and you make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And sometimes you do the implementation, but not always. Most of the time you're guiding them through that. Their team is doing the implementation and everything. That's why you're being brought on. Fix their stuff. In this job, you're all of it. You are the consultant, you are the solutionist, you are the implementer, you are the all of it. You are the roadmapper, you are the creator, you are now let's go and do this, let's execute it. You are the continuous monitoring piece. You're all those things that as a consultant, you pitch and help them develop. Now I'm doing all of it. And what's unique about Pearson, and I think it is unique to Pearson, not a lot of companies operate this way, but Pearson has 6 different functions. They have the digital and technology where I sit. So that's the main kind of area. But then we have 5 businesses. And every single one of those businesses have their own entire ecosystem with CTOs. Some of them have quote unquote quasi security teams, marketing teams, hiring teams, their HR. They have their own way of doing things. We have 17,000 employees. And so what's unique about my role and my team is we sit not only in CISO, so we drive security objectives, but we work in all of the divisions. So I have to know, we're not like the other elements within CISO, which provide a service, but they sit directly in CISO, and they do have some connects into the division. I'm not saying that, but our role specifically as the business information security team is to embed into the division and know exactly what's happening day to day, so we can address security concerns before they happen and then drive that back. So it's that the complexity to your question was really whoa to me, but then recognizing how different the commercial sector is versus the federal sector. And just the consultant part, I tell everybody, I think everybody should be a consultant for at least 2 years, because the skills that I gained from that has helped me immensely. Because one of the big things you need to be able to do is storytelling and sharing and socializing the plans that you want to achieve. And I learned all of that through consulting. So now that's helping me within this role of developing relationships and helping with driving my strategy at the end of the day. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And speaking of strategy, and again, I know some of this is you and I, worked on some of this, kind of as you've transitioned and worked towards this, but I want to pull this out, for everybody to see. Did you develop kind of either pre-employment or as you've gotten settled into Pearson, did you develop a 30, 60, 90-day strategy? And if so, talk high level. I don't want you to disclose anything sensitive. Can you kind of describe what that was? And then what I want you to do then is also tell the audience how that changed once you got hired and realized, oh crap, this is reality.
Yeah, so I jumped in really eager. I was like, I'm going to do a 90-day strategy. We're going to like 3 months. We're going to like thinking we're like super agile and all this is going to happen. And I came in just like, woo, that, really like that, like new kid that's like super excited. Yeah, about 4 or 5 weeks in, I was like, WTF, what did I just get into, Neal? Yeah, that was a me problem, not a them problem, because you can't change a massive organization to move faster. So you have to kind of reassess what you're going to do. And I'm one of those people that I like to overperform. So I knew immediately as I was coming into my second month, this amazing 90-day strategy that I had put was a little more optimistic than I realized was possible and a little bit more aggressive. And so I actually took a step back and I made a 6-month plan. And I don't know if that's 180 days or whatever, but I re-strategized this. I was like, okay, it's not, because everybody hears about the 90 days. And for me, I had to change. So in 2 months, I said, screw it. My 90 days is it's about developing relationships. It's about knowing my team's talents or gaps. It's about making a foundation for my team. So in 3 months, I want to turn around and I want to launch all of these big projects. But in the first 3 to 4 months, I've got to build credibility. I have to build trust. I have to know who my team is. And then I can start building these big projects. And so that was my huge awakening moment. So I took this massive step back, revamped everything, took a different approach to how I was doing it, all about relationship driven. And I can tell you personally, I'm really proud of kind of the direction we're going, and we're cusping into our 6 months. And the 2 huge projects that we're kicking off in the next 6 months are coming into fruition. Like, these are massive things that are happening now. But if you had asked me 2 or 3 months ago, I don't know, I would have been like, ugh. Yeah, culture. And that's the other thing, culture change. So one of the things my boss said when he brought me on is he wanted to see a culture shift. And Neal knows this personally. There were some hard weeks, hard days that I was just like, what have I gotten into? But I can personally tell you that if I ever have to go through this again, a culture change, now I know that when culture change happens, personalities, people's opinions, people's feelings will get hurt. People are not going to want to see the change happen. People are going to get angry. But if you stay the course and you continue to socialize, communicate what's going to be happening and listen to people, most people get on board and they figure it out. And it was right around the 3 months, 4 months that you started to really see the changes from things. But it was really bumpy there for a bit. Yeah. I love that. I love this story, and I love this story for a couple of different reasons, right? Because I think everybody has been through that hard charging phase, right? And I equate it to the folks who are listening in. Whenever you have a moment where you're like, why don't they just patch that vulnerability? Why don't they just upgrade that system? Why don't they just make everybody implement MFA? If you had to speak to those people who are just why don't they just do these common cybersecurity things? Explain to people how you personally came about those challenges inside of an organization like Pearson, where you realized that people weren't as agile or going to move as fast as you thought they would. Yeah, and I think part of this, and I just have to say, DJ BISO, good to see you. He said, Jax coming in running full speed and someone threw down a glue trap. So, dude, so true. Oh my God. And then I was like, ugh. And I'm like, what is happening? I was not making friends and influencing people in my first few weeks. People were like, who is this chick? Oh, it's terrible. But so from this perspective of thinking of Pearson and having the 5 divisions and everything, what I always try to take the perspective, and this is just in life, is that everybody's doing the best that they can. I always assume a positive intent. And something you sometimes see in security is oh, people are just doing that out of spite. They're not listening. I wish they would just install multi-factor. It's not that hard. But there's always a reason why it's not getting done. And what I did is I had all these calls with the CTOs within the different divisions, and I asked them immediately, one of the first things I said is, what are your security challenges? What are your pain points? What are the areas that CISO isn't supporting you? And across the board, what I was hearing is that they felt like CISO wasn't listening to them. Like they felt, and in a way, here's an example of that, like our policies. It's very hard to create a policy that's going to be able to appease the entire division and everybody in it. I will give you one example of this. So one of our divisions, we're an education company. So we have end users, and then we have 5 divisions, and then we have multiple businesses inside of those divisions which have their own set of leadership, their own products, their own assets. Some of these need to be able to give end users certain types of access. And so then trying to get multi-factor on that or single sign-on, there's one platform we have that they have to use 2 different single sign-ons to be able to get into the environment to be able to operate. So what I've noticed is, and this is for all security professionals that work at large organizations, encouraging you to step out of your area and your silo and recognize that although it's easy for you to install MFA and you're like, yeah, it just takes X, Y, and Z, everybody should do it. There's probably other intricacies that are at play that the leadership is not setting that up. There might be some issues with the users being able to get in there. So they're like providing them that they don't have to have MFA or single sign-on or whatever the situation is. That's what I've started to realize was when I started sitting down with them and asking, because I'll ask, like, if it was MFA, why aren't you utilizing MFA in this environment? Ask them questions, and typically they have an answer to it. Is the right answer? I'll let you all decide that. But then how to make this happen, how to get MFA across the organization is then you figure out what their problem is, identify the gap, and then you work with them to fix it. And one of the CTOs told me last week when I was briefing one of my future plans of my team of where I want us to be around like partnerships versus like this push relationship. He told me directly, he's like, up to this point, I feel like it's been a push. Like security just pushes down what they want, but it hasn't been a partnership of like, how can we help you and your business grow and keep it secure? And that's what I'm really trying to cultivate from my team is like, CISO's here to support you guys, not to try to make your guys' lives harder and like trying to like demystify our role is the most important thing. So it's like education. Yeah. And
imagine that an education company has to educate its company on the principles of cybersecurity.
Yeah. But twofold to that too, especially all my peers that have been there much longer than me that are like working their tails off. Sometimes it just gets frustrating, Neal. Yeah. You're like, from our lens, you're like, we know this is a security concern. We know these things. We've pushed it out and you're still not doing it. So I see that factor as well. But at the end of the day, if we want these leaders to do what we need them to do, in my opinion, it's better when you sit down, you understand why they're doing that, and then you adjust to help them figure out how to do that. So it's not linear. It's one thing I've learned. Security will never be linear. You have to work with your clients, your customers. I'm telling my team, we're calling them our partners now. All the division leaders, they're our partners. We're working with them. They're not our business units. They're our partners.
Yeah. Well, now on that same note, I think that's a good transition, right? Because part of your job, as you've kind of talked about, at Pearson, is that business information, security, business that you happen to be in. You talk about these 6 different business units and just, you this recommunication and this almost integration you had to do with an expectation setting with the CISO organization. How hard was it for you personally to navigate the vast diversity of business personalities and do it on behalf of the CISO organization in an organization like Pearson? We're talking a global organization, 6 different business units, 6 different effective CEOs that have 6 different strategies, to your points, potentially 6 different, tech stacks for architecture. How hard was it navigating that diversity of personalities?
Fortunately, I can honestly say that it was easy for me because I have that type of personality that I can usually relate to almost anybody. And so I think because of how I held the first calls, it wasn't about me in my intro. Like I told them who I was, because I think you need to provide, hey, I'm here, this is my background. But most of the call was, I'm here to understand what are your challenges. I'm here to help make your life easier. I want this to be like an open conversation. I want you to be super direct with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But if I don't know that you're having problems or challenges, I can't address them. That was the first part, Neal. The second part of that, to create the credibility and trust, because it's easy to have a conversation and be like, great, thanks for all these gaps. I appreciate it. I'm going to take care of you. The second part of that was actually following up with them, following through, starting to address these problems that they're facing. And now that I'm coming into that 6 months, they're starting to see, okay, I'm starting to see the traction in this. I'm actually starting to see the changes that you're starting to make in the organization. So it takes time. And in my opinion, it's all about building trust. And the way to build trust around people is to allow people to be seen and heard and valued. Like really, truly value them. And that's what I did. I just sat down. It wasn't about me. It was about them. Tell me all your problems. And then I took that back. And then I started figuring out, as part of my 6-point plan, how can we better support them? And then now I provide that to my team. Like every week I have a call with my team, and I encourage them. Like, these are your partners. You are the entrepreneurs. You are the security evangelist. Go and support them. Like, it's not us against them. And it takes time. It does. It takes a lot of time to build trust.
This all sounds rosy, but I gotta push you on this a little bit, and you know, let's be realistic. I'm sure not everybody welcomed you with open arms in an organization like this. There's always got to be somebody who's resistant to change, who throws up roadblocks left and right, who, you know, absolutely refuses to see that there is a need for your existence in an enterprise or an organization. Did you encounter that? And if you didn't, how would you recommend somebody address that challenge?
I'm going to be really careful of how I answer this.
Welcome back to the hot seat, Jax.
All right. So, okay. What I recognized when I first got on board, and this was my naivety. Yeah, that's probably wrong, right way of saying it. Being naive, that I knew what a business information security officer was, a BISO. For anybody, that's what they're usually called. And my team is filled with BISOs. Not everybody understands the role of a BISO. And so when I came in, I immediately assumed that, for example, my peers were on board with my team and how they operated. So I just immediately, like I said, just jumped in, head forward, because I saw my team, which they are, as a huge positive impact, not only for the divisions, but for CISO, because we help make CISO's lives easier. Now, were we doing that when I came on board? Not exactly, because my team didn't have leadership in place. We were going through a leadership change. So there was that was kind of part of this. So when I got on board and I was like, yeah, let's go, we're going to do all these things, I got a significant amount of resistance from my peers that I was not expecting, to the point that one of my peers asked me during a call with my team, and we were trying, because I was trying to bridge the gap between us and we were having some challenges, and they looked at my team with me on the call and said, I need you to fill out a document and tell me your value on how you're going to help me. Oh. And it was very degrading. It made my team, as you can imagine, extremely upset. Yeah. But what I soon realized at that moment is I had to change my tactic, and that I had to figure out a way. And I feel like your peers are probably the hardest people to win over versus like the divisions and business owner. They don't have skin in the game. And so I had to take a step back, and that turned into, as you can imagine, other issues at the same time. But it took time, and it took time through education. It took time by working with my team and getting them back into alignment of what they were actually supposed to be doing, because they were doing a great job, but they didn't have leadership guiding them as far as what are your roles and responsibilities look like? What are we supposed to be doing? Kind of getting rid of miscommunication that was happening, because my team would communicate something that wasn't correct from what, should have been communicated from another department in CISO. So I think as we've moved through that, and then we've had some personnel changes happen through that, it's been immensely better. But when I first got on board, there were some immense challenges with that I had to address, and it was not easy at all.
Well, thank you for the transparency, and thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's important for people to realize that, there's a lot of dynamics that come in when you're coming into an organization, everything from we're glad you're here to some resistance. And there's a lot of different ways that you as a senior leader have to look to address that. And so I appreciate that. I want to pivot really quick because you've recently done some cool stuff, and I want to talk about some of that cool stuff. But you also took on some challenges going into Pearson, if I recall. You were challenged to take on some of the difficulties in understanding AI and how to best position it inside of Pearson. And I want to kind of hear from you, how daunting was that challenge when it was laid before you around AI?
AI is a beast. People think they're just like, they throw around AI as if it's this like one thing, and it's like Chat GPT, and that's just even just one fragment of AI. It's super challenging, and I'll be the first one to say I am by no means an expert in this field. I know enough to be dangerous, and I know how to search. I think that's like any programmer out there, though, if they're very honest. I know enough, and I know how to be able to smell the BS if necessary. But I will say we've gotten an AI person on our team now, so he's very knowledgeable, which is helpful. But I was very, very cautious when I got in there, and I think that when you're going into a field in the tech space, you never want to overpromise any of your skill sets because, we all have seen that meme before.
Absolutely.
Where you overpromise and get in, and then everybody realizes, you overcommitted yourself on your resume. Lied on your resume. Yeah.
Now, chat, really quick, pay attention. This is one of the times where chat, stop multitasking and listen to what I got to say here. Jax has created a course, and I appreciate her modesty on this, but as you can tell, she's intensely passionate, and she's intensely, she's a deep researcher and tries very, very hard to be an expert and understand things. So I'll speak for her, I'll brag about her a little bit in that regard, having worked with her for a number of years now. Jax, you've gone on and you've created a course with ACI on auditing artificial intelligence. And in doing your research, and Chad, this is for you, in doing her research, she obviously had to do a ton of research and become an expert in creating this content. Jax, you've been nice enough, and Chad Jax has gone out of her way to exclusively launch access to that content here with us today. And so anybody in Twitch chat, you should be able to use the !AI, and I'll get a mod to post it over to to YouTube and to LinkedIn as well for the links. But you can get access to the brand new cyber and security website for all of her AI auditing research. This isn't her course, and Jax, you can talk about your course here in a little bit, but this is all the research that she used to build an AI auditing course that is now available on ACI. So Jax, on behalf of my community and everybody throw their hands together for Jax in terms of this, thank you so very much for making this available to my community and to yours moving forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I honestly, after you and I started talking about it, what was it, a couple of days ago, I'd never even thought about like repurposing the content and sharing it with the community, because it was a really in-depth AI audit course to teach you about like what is AI versus assurance and assessment and the different types of models. So I think you guys will like it. Hopefully reach out to me if you have questions. Tons of references. I will have to add credit though. I did take the course through Dr. Shay Brown with Babel AI. Amazing company. That company is the company I would recommend for anything AI audit. Like, they are a reputable company. There's a ton of non-reputable companies out there that are just throwing the sticker of AI on there. This company actually helped drive the AI Act, and they're also part of the For Humanities, which is a nonprofit that's driving a lot of the AI initiatives. So the guy's great. Dr. Shay Brown, he has his own YouTube as well. But yeah, that's where I got those references.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's dive into a little bit of those references, and let's share some of your learnings about AI with the community as you've gone through this. Let's start very, very basic. Let's start at the top. What is AI auditing, and why is it important?
Audit. Okay. So AI, be clear, like auditing is a more rigid approach than like assessing something. Usually an audit is associated with a law, like a legal law that you're having to do an audit. An example of this is the New York City law, AI law that came out like a year ago. They required, if I remember this correctly, a third party to come in and audit their HR systems, not assess them, not create assurance. So it's usually surrounded by laws, legal legal requirements for the company. The challenge that I identified when I was building out the course, because I told ACI Learning, yeah, let's do this. And then I got about a month in and I was like, I need like 4 months to build this course because it was just it was really wild. I still can't believe I did it, Neal. But I just wanted, because I like to make sure that I know the topic that I'm teaching. So I dove into it. And what I realized is there's so much complexity for anybody that's like an AI nerd out there knows this. There's so much complexity to the AI with the various different layers of like, you've got, not just AI, but then the machine learning, the deep learning, the artificial neural networks. Then you get into the different types of models that are associated with it. So with auditing, there are so many different tools that you can utilize. Like, I think there was like probably 30 or 40 different tools. There's like the top 3 that you might use, like the Confucian Matrix and the AC Rock. But what I realized is you can audit very different things. You might be auditing for bias. You might be auditing for like an algorithm. You might be auditing the data filtering that's coming in and out. That's the thing that was like really shocking to me. It's not auditing an AI system is not one size fit all. And one of the first steps when you do an audit is you have to get super, super crystal clear on the data set that you're auditing, why you're auditing, because you could audit, one model, you could probably audit it 5 or 10 different ways if you wanted to. So it's not, what was interesting to me is when you do a CSF assessment, it's pretty clear cut. You go in, you know what you're assessing, you know how you're doing it. That's not with AI. There's so many different ways. So you've got to be really careful when you're asking for an AI audit, being really crystal clear on what that looks like. And if you don't get the right team in there, how are they going to know?
So this is interesting because like you said a couple things in terms of like different types of ways to audit, talking about auditing the input and output. And I think we've seen various iterations of that over the last couple of years with ChatGPT as people have like tried to fish sensitive information out of models and manipulate the input to get different types of output and things like that. But you mentioned something there that I want to kind of dive in a little bit because I hadn't thought about that before. You talk about biases in AI systems. How do you get biases in AI systems? What are biases in AI systems? How do you get them?
Okay, biases are generated by the data, typically generated by where you were pulling the data. There's systematic biases, so like historical, social biases. There's human biases, so that could be like an individual or group, and then statistical or computational biases, so process validation. So you can get a bias by bringing in the data. You can also get a bias, this is where it gets even more fun, on how you train the data. So how, depending on the neural network that you're utilizing and how the data is going through, you can have a filter in there. If the filter is off and like tweaked wrong, you can start creating unknown biases by how you're processing and validating and using and interpreting the data. So biases, you may not even, when you first get the data set in there, they may not actually have biases, but then they can be created by those biases, how they're being filtered and then trained. What makes AI so really complex to be able to audit.
What are some of the impacts if you allow those biases to transit through the model and make it into, operational, roles inside the engine?
Okay, so one is, for example, if you the compass example, COMPAS, this was a system that was being used to evaluate criminals that were going through the system. And they were using data based on prior arrest, if they had it, any other like credit score data, general lifestyle data, all of this. And then it was included into the system. And then the judges would base their sentencing around compass. And what they identified is that, and this is just one example, what they identified is based on color, based on race, it would classify the African-American inmates as a higher risk such as if they were let go, they would go and repeat the offense, versus the white individuals would be lower. But what was interesting when they dug into the research, and this, I think that's still being used, this came out, I want to say in 2013, the system might have been a little bit earlier than that, but it was still in use. But what they realized is when they actually went into the data and they conducted an audit on the data, they validated that a lot of the white individuals actually had like 3 or 4 offenses, and the African Americans had no prior offenses, yet they were being ranked as higher. So what that does is create that bias to now you're giving a person a longer sentence life because this system, supposedly this algorithm, is now telling you that they're going to be more likely to leave and go and do the same offense again. So it's impacting people's lives. It's also the other way is you're seeing HR as a perfect example of this. That's why the New York law came out. They're required to do a third-party assessment on their systems because they're starting to realize there's a lot of biases in the system, depending on your age, how you're writing things, if you're using a photo, and it's starting to eliminate people from that. So that's just like and I know there's been a lot of people that have been impacted by that, but the Compass one, it's out there. I dug super into that one. That one, that'll blow your mind if anybody hasn't seen that one.
Yeah.
COMPAS. Yeah.
So
and it's still, and as far as I know, it's still being utilized today. I don't know if I've assumed they're probably tweaked the algorithm, I would think.
So this is super interesting. So as you're diving deep into this and you're learning about biases and you're learning about, the impacts of all this, algorithmic bias that could potentially be introduced into AIs and all the data that kind of goes in associated with this, when you take a step back in your role, especially in a security organization as a BISO, trying to advise and look across, an organization like Pearson, how do you look at AI governance when you think about the AI systems that you may be utilizing inside of an organization like Pearson?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's not, since this is so new, there's so much ambiguity around like AI governance as a whole. The biggest thing is I would take a step back and understand what are the possible biases that we could have within our environment based on the AI tool set that we have, and then identifying the techniques to be able to mitigate those AI biases. An example is if it's associated with the human bias and not having, maybe there's not enough data set that represents the underrepresented community in that area, maybe it's pulling in additional data from another area, knowing that there could be a possible data bias. Also, another piece is if we have a system that maybe it's a grading system, maybe it's something like that, or not a grading system, but a system that helps you get into school, like college. I know there's systems out there that do that. If you know that it's naturally going to have a bias and you can see that and test it, identify and creating processes around that to mitigate those biases. And there's so many different ways to be able to mitigate those biases, but they're all unique to that audit and that system and what you're utilizing it for.
That's awesome. And I want to circle back because you talked about the data that's being used to fed that. I imagine when you think about, again, an organization like Pearson, lots of different opportunity to use LLM in any of the 6 different business models that you got. The data challenge that exists with governing the data that feeds these models, I imagine has to be pretty intimidating.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've not seen them, but I can imagine like large language models, things like that. Like they're not, and those aren't even properly, like you're not really, you haven't put a filter on that data yet. It's when you take either a small language model or a large language model and you put it in to a data set and you start utilizing that, depending on your neural network that you're using to train the data, or maybe it's a direct line, but you're probably training it depending on the complexity and what you're doing. So like the medical field, for example, they need AI governance. But what I noticed when I was doing a lot of my research is there was a system that was being utilized and it was supposed to be trained, but there was discrepancies in the data and the executives knew about it. And so this was over a decade ago, and it was at like Memorial Sloan. If you guys want to look it up, I think it was like Watson Health or something. And what they had identified is that they were misdiagnosing patients off of the data. So there were, I think it's called like a false positive or something. So that was happening more often than not. So these patients were being treated for cancer when they didn't have cancer.
Oh, wow.
And they knew this. And the executives of IBM knew that there was discrepancies in the data set and they still sold the product.
Wow.
It's wild. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where yeah. And so that was the other thing that I noticed in this. It's like, people can die from this, or you could be, or the flip side of that, if you're not careful, we rely too heavily on AI in the medical space. What if you do have cancer, but then you're misdiagnosed that you don't have cancer? And this is all part of my class went over. I think it was the Confucius Matrix actually is the tool that I was teaching people to utilize. And what you do is you would pull out a numeric based value based on the test that you ran on the data set. And then based on that, you would put it into the 4 blocks of the Confucian Matrix. And then you would be able to identify if it's a true positive, false positive, so forth. And then based on that data set and your testing, then you would look at it and see, because you're always going to have some data that's not accurate, but then you would be able to see how far off is it, and then you tweak the data, you refilter, you tune it, and then you keep that main data set, that training set, basically, you keep training that model, and then you put that back into the model. So the model stays the same, but you pull out a training set, and that's how they'll do the testing on the model. So they can't test. I mean, you can try. It's like boiling the ocean, what people don't realize. So you have to actually take a training set out, and then you test that, and then you try to tweak the entire model and how it's operating. Yeah.
Wow. This has obviously generated a lot of questions here. The first one from our good friend BSEC, right?
Nice.
But can you truly mitigate the bias if the AI is always training on new data and users could squelch the data with their inputs?
No, you can't. No, bias is always going to be there. By skewing the data, you're naturally creating a bias to mitigate the bias. So there's always going to be a bias. It's to make sure that it's not harming somebody. It's not creating like cause of death, like cancer to somebody, like cancer treatment to somebody that doesn't need it. Or if you're noticing that the data set is not targeting the under, what am I trying to say? Not underappreciated, but underrepresented population. That's a bias naturally in the data set, but bringing in that data to adjust the bias is creating a artificial bias now because you're wanting to balance out the data set.
So it's like a vicious loop.
Exactly. So that's why it's so important to audit these systems and pay attention to it. And people are starting to realize how sensitive these systems are. And it's not just plug and play, like plug and play. And then once it starts doing its training, it could think about it. It's like flying. If it's off by 1% on how you're training after time, I mean, you're going to be in California instead of Seattle.
What is so then so this feels like security control 101, right? Like you've got to build this thing secure by design from Jump Street. And so like what are some key considerations when you're building, if you're in this model space, you've got tons of data, to your point, you're not going to be able to assess all the data that's going into the model, but how do you ensure algorithmic fairness when you're looking at these types of models?
Okay, so that's such a good question.
Thank you.
If I was creating, I'm like, man, if I was creating this from scratch, what would that look like? I think that it would get into taking into consideration that it's more than just humans that you want to look at. You want to look at the impact on the people, technology, even the planet when you're building out these systems. And they call it, Babel calls it, I don't know if it's collectively within the AI org, socio-economical systems. Crap, am I saying that right?
I think so. That sounds right. Socio-economic? I think it's just economic.
Social-technical AI systems. Yeah, and that is all about considering other aspects, not just the technical aspect, but realizing that there's people are going to be associated with it, the hardware, the laws, the regulation, the data, the algorithm model. So when you do one of these things, you have to look at like what is the decision or the end that we want out of this, because the algorithm or the model, it takes the data in, you filter based on what you're utilizing as your filters. Your neural networks are all inside what we call, a black box, gray box, white box. And then based on that and how you've modeled it is going to deliver you a decision, which that's when you take your human action or, laws and regulations are all based on the decision. So you have to consider all of that from the data point all the way to the decision when you're building these. And what they're trying to do too is they being the government of the United States, is trying to approve opening up the black boxes so we can have more transparency. However, I don't think that's going to happen because there's a lot of proprietary, especially with how we're now integrating our world into API keys. So I foresee the future of this. If we can get into that, that will get more into a gray box where you can see some of the inner workings, but you can't see all of them. Otherwise, I think we're going to have like breach of privacy. But to really make sure that these systems are protected and they're doing what they need to be doing, we would need to, in essence, go to a white box to know, like, how is this operating? And that's the other challenge. We're not going to get there. It's going to be black box. We're only going to be able to test based on the data going in, the filter. We won't know very much on the black box, and then the output. That's really what you're testing on. And then you're only testing on a data set, not even the entire box. That's what makes it so challenging. Yeah.
Wow. So I mean, you've done a lot of this research. You've obviously, I mean, you've dived really, really deep into this and done a lot of work. And you know, we can continue to dive in this, but I think this is a really great question here from Twitch, which is, how deep does one's knowledge need to be to audit AI? Should you be familiar with linear algebra, gradient descent algorithms, et cetera? Like, what do you think the maturity level of that education needs to be?
Who sent that? Oh, Camir. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cami. I'm gonna call you Cami if you don't mind. That all of those. Like, I took the Babel AI course. It was like a $2 or $3 grand course to take, and it was a remarkable course. But I can tell you, when I got into, like, he goes deep in the math, and I'm like, I had to pull up and out on that. He got into the linear algebra, everything. Like, he went into it. So that's why I said his team does it the right way. Like, they dive into this. Now, I think that at a super high level, you might be able to audit these systems, but if you want to really do it right, you're going to have to understand algorithms, math. You're going to have, like, I wish I had been that smart when I was younger.
Right.
Yeah, I pulled up and out. I didn't even finish that course curriculum. It was a whole section that was really, really tough. If you guys are interested in it, I think he breaks up those sections. So you might just be able to take that if you guys like math, because he has a PhD in physics. So he dives in like deep. Yeah, and I took some of them, but it was so far over my head. He goes into like major algorithms, breaking it down, and just my head exploded. So yeah.
So it's fair to say though that, like, if we were to look at things on a spectrum, like, obviously, you know, there's a lot of different depths in which you could be an expert in terms of auditing, especially, and I say expert, like, is it fair to say that AI is still so new that there's a lot of different places that, regardless of what your mathematical expertise is or where you're at from an understanding perspective, you could fit in somewhere on this AI auditing spectrum?
Oh my God, yes. There is actually part of my course. I talk about the non-technical aspects that you need, because you need to both have the technical prowess, but also the non-technical. So an ideal team, in my opinion, would be 2-person team. Someone that's really has great interpersonal skills and can help with writing the report, because that's the critical part, and can be able to communicate what's happening technically to the business level. So you need that person, and then you need a wicked technical person that has that mathematical background that can really dissect those systems or those models in the way that we would need. That would be an ideal world for me as a 2-woman team to do that. But I agree with you. It's still, we're maturing, but we're still in a very immature space as far as understanding AI and how it works and how to audit it. Not so much how it works, probably more around, like, how do we audit this effectively so we can not only identify these biases, but hopefully prevent more coming in by trying to adjust. So I don't think we're there yet.
So that's an interesting segue, right? Because, you know, you're in the content space. I'm sure you get this from your community. I get this from my community a lot in terms of AI and its future, specifically in the cybersecurity organization and stuff like that. If you were to, now that you've gone through all this AI stuff and you've really dove into the deep end of the pool, if you had to predict 3 ways that AI could be used today to make a cybersecurity organization better, more efficient, you know, things like that, like, what would you narrow those down to?
Okay, so one way that I've seen, and you and I actually talked about it, but I don't know how effective this would be yet because I didn't use the tool, but in GRC, there was a tool that we were looking at that was going to be able to go in and I wasn't on all the meetings, but I heard that they were going to go in and they were going to basically scan our network and see where our deficiencies were as far as compliance and policies and all of this. And then they were going to provide us with this, what sounded like, here's a roadmap to get you to kind of where you are to the future state. I don't trust that yet. I think we can get there, but I would be leery to lay too heavily on that without trust but verify first. So I think that once we kind of tweak that, I think it can be a great resource for us to be able to go into our environment, identify that, and then create the documents we need. Like have a smaller language model that we utilize that knows our policies, knows how we do everything, and it does it all for us. So that's it. The other thing is on security specifically, and we're seeing this with more and more organizations, the use of AI within the intelligence space and being able to use like a certain code or something to be able to scrape for indicators of compromise, pulling data much faster. I think it's probably out there. I just don't know it, like something for the dark net. Actually, I have seen it, and they can go in and they can actually scrape the dark net much faster to be able to get data associated with a keyword. So that would be helpful for security. And then the other one that I have seen, but I don't know how effective it is these organizations are pitching that they can come into your network and kind of like the GRC tool, connect the APIs. And the next thing you know, they're able to go and do a scan and then provide all the gaps, what needs to be done. And it's all like within a second. I don't know if because we're building out a dashboard right now and it's taking immense long time. But I do think those are going to be areas things that are really laborious for us. I don't think they're going to get rid of that, but I think they're going to help us expedite some of those processes in the future. And I think in the future, in like the next 3 to 5 years, I don't think we're there yet. I think a lot of companies, not all, but I think a lot of companies are they're overcommitting and overselling what they have with AI.
So funny you mentioned, as Jax talks about the GRC space and AI, make sure you're tuning in tomorrow morning at 8:30 Eastern. I've got she's an ex-McKinsey GRC person. She's coming on the stream tomorrow morning, and she's going to speak heavily about using AI in the GRC space, and I think that's going to speak heavily to what Jax is talking about. So if you're interested in continuing the AI conversation, especially in the GRC space, make sure you tune in tomorrow morning at 8:30, when we talk about that. One more for you, because I thought this was really interesting. You talk about having, back on the Pearson conversation, you talk about having some, transformational activities going on inside of Pearson. You've had some staff, transitions that have happened as well. Pearson is growing. Obviously you're over there and you're kicking ass, and I couldn't be prouder of you for that. And you got a really awesome boss if he's watching, on top of that as well. The question is what is the best scripting language to learn as a cybersecurity professional? I think that's kind of the lead in. But also, like, ultimately, what's the best way to get hired at Pearson? Like, what are you guys looking for over there?
It's a good question right now too, because we are going to be opening the doors for some higher end. So Python is what I learned, but I have not done it in a long time. I enjoyed it. I felt like it was super easy. Well, easy in terms, but I learned it in the military like many years ago. And even when I pick it up again, it's like riding a bike. And I'm like, wow, this isn't too terrible until you get your error message. So I enjoyed Python. I encourage everybody to start with Python. I thought it was super user friendly compared to like other ones like SQL. SQL coding one. I hated SQL. I hated it. And I still hate it. They used it capital one all the time and like the snowflake, whatever. I'm PTSD over here. Yeah. Anyway, terrible. All the SQL people out there. So yeah, that was my thought on that. And then Pearson. Okay. So we're going to have positionings opening up within our security operations center, looking for like a SOC person, SOC manager, somebody with an incident response background, also possibly opening up an area within like XRAMP, so knowledge about XRAMP, helping, and this will be organizational wide with that team, kind of like what I do, but from a different team. And then I am looking for somebody in my team, and Q's gonna be like, she hasn't even put the job up yet. I am, and he knows it.
Q, if you're watching, she's letting you know right now.
Yeah. He's gonna be like, what the hell? I am actually looking for somebody that has cloud experience. I'm prefer not entry level. This needs to be somebody with at least 5 to 8 years of experience, because you're going to be working with like senior VPs, directors globally to help drive change within our data. I need data. Somebody is very familiar with Microsoft data, just movement of data protection, cloud environments, servers. We have a few prim and we're moving those to cloud. Yeah, that's a big thing. And I can always if anybody has any of those backgrounds, they've got like 5 to 6 years of experience. We could probably, I don't think it'll be entry level, but you need a few years experience for SOC, and XRAMP may be entry level. So that one I'd have to talk to the person over there. So yeah, and then
Obviously, you're hiring a ton of people. Let's not flood Jax's DMs with like, "Hey, hire me." Best place to go and see the open roles currently?
Oh, yeah. Just go to Pearson, like Google Pearson security roles. I would say like Pearson.com. I don't actually know the URL for the positions, but look in there and see. And if you do see something and you're interested and it aligns with you, like Neal said, reach out. Yep. But yeah, please don't. I don't really check my LinkedIn often anyway. So if you flood me, I probably won't respond. And I don't mean that meanly. It's a lot right now. So, but I would love to help you. Yeah. If we find it and you're like, oh my God, I heard what you said. I have this resume. I want to work at Pearson. Send it to me.
Absolutely. So you can check out Jax's AI content by hitting that !AI in chat, or one of the mods can post it across the platforms. Jax, thanks again so much for making that content available to the team. Make sure you check out the new cybersecurity.tv website. It's in the toolbox, just in case you forget. It's in the toolbox there. Jax, the floor is yours. Say whatever it is you'd like to say to the community.
Well, first off, God, thank you guys for showing up and being here with me. The last time I was here was like 2 or 3 years ago, and I had just gotten laid off 3 days prior, and wasn't sure I should even live stream with you, Neal. But
yes,
the world is like, it's gone from that to where I'm at now. But at the end of the day, I love you guys. It's a huge community. This wouldn't be fun if you guys weren't here. So I thank you, Neal, for having me on here, and great questions. And it was just great to see familiar faces at the end of the day. Yeah.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Talk to you next time. Yep. I'm going to send you back over to the green room. I'm going to say goodbye to my folks here in a little bit. Everybody, give it up for Jax. Show some love in chat for Jax. Absolutely amazing. I love having her on. I'm super proud of all the work that she's done at Pearson and the way that she's gone. So, absolutely love having her on there. Make sure you hit that !point guest if you need access to her LinkedIn. If you don't already have it, make sure you head over there, throw her a like, throw her a follow, go check out her content on Outpost. Great. Thank you so very much for tuning in today. As I mentioned, tomorrow morning, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have some more continuation of AI conversations, as well as like I said, we're going to bring in a little bit of GRC stuff. We'll still do our AMA tomorrow, but yes, the first hour we're going to be talking with a guest first thing in the morning. It's rare, so make sure that you are tuned in for that. With that being said, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm not going to tell you what the guest is just yet, but you're really going to like it. Whether you're on the red team or the blue team or still deciding, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.